You are listening to the world famous Jiggy Jaguar radio broadcast. We are live coast to coast and border to border on JiggyJaguar.com. Also, kicking ass and taking names on 50 plus AM FM stations across the country and around the world. KFRK in Denver, as well as a few others. And 24/7 on the iHeart Radio app. And of course, the Odyssey app, which sometimes I just shake my head when I have to say those words on this show. But today on our big broadcast, we are diving into one of the most explosive and controversial investigative breakthroughs to emerge in years, a shocking reframing of the Jeffrey Epstein story. While the world has spent basically decades focused on the whole sex trafficking, the blackmail, we have got an investigative author and former Margaret Thatcher speechwriter with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He says we've been looking through the wrong end of the telescope. And we go to Geoff. He joins us here on the old StreamYard. And Geoff, welcome to the big broadcast. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me on the show.
So, one of the things that everybody is so obsessed with this whole Epstein thing is the whole sex trafficking. However, he was doing all sorts of crazy things on those islands. They were doing cloning and life extension technology, and came out a few years ago. Him and Fauci apparently were torturing animals on the island, which they should hang him. They should hang him for that. Forget about the sex trafficking part of it. But let's talk a little bit about reframing the whole Epstein narrative. Your research suggests that the dominant narrative around Epstein, of course, obviously, is the sex trafficking and some of the different things that he's doing. But it's a secondary storyline. What is the single most convincing piece of evidence that redirected your attention toward arms, finance, intelligence operations, basically centered there in London?
Well, I'll get to that, but before we do,
Yes.
let me just say this: there is nothing that is more primary in the Jeffrey Epstein story than the abuse of human beings.
Well, yeah,
Um, I think
yeah,
there's another angle to it, and I think that we may miss that. But whatever happens, particularly now with the Epstein File Transparency Act, it will never take away from the fact that there were victims who were abused, and that's who we must remember first of all. And the second point,
and
in that,
several of them that have spoken out and mysteriously have vanished, or mysteriously have committed suicide, or mysteriously, yeah. So,
I mean, that is very true. And the second thing is, and I hesitate to say this, but it is part of the introduction to what I'm going to say next, is that I do not believe there will be any great revelation when these so-called alleged files are going to be
yes,
released. Um,
yes.
the one important word in that regard, the one important word in that regard is unclassified. They're going to be unclassified files, and I don't think there's a great deal more that we're going to learn. And the problem there is that, with people's low attention span, 140 character attention span, when they don't see a lot of new names, when there isn't all the emotional comfort for the victims that there should be, people will move on. And that's the danger, because Epstein is more than just the sexual abuse. In fact, he was involved in other things for the same reason that he was involved in his sexual abuse. Now, you asked me, we've got some time, so we'll get into some of the
Oh
details.
yeah.
What is the single most important thing? Two things that people by and large are missing. Epstein did not begin in New York. Epstein's forays into both sexual depravity and his covert operation as an Israeli agent began in London in the 80s, long before he got to New York. That's being missed. The other thing, and I want to make it absolutely clear, lots of caveats. I am not anti Semitic, but the other thing that most people are forgetting is that he grew up in a Jewish neighborhood in New York. The Jewish diaspora in the United States, in particular, is very loyal to Israel. They may sometimes disagree with the politics that's relevant in Israel, but they're very loyal to Israel. and some of my research done only in the last few months into his upbringing, he is a very loyal Israeli child. And people forget that. Another name that we're going to come across is Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, who is the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. And frankly, we're looking at the wrong Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's pimp, but it was Robert Maxwell with whom he was involved in business. And Robert Maxwell was an Anglophile. Everyone who comes across him, he's now dead, of course, thinks of him as British. He wasn't. He began as a Czechoslovakian Jew, and only after he died did it become clear that his primary loyalty wasn't to Great Britain, it was to Israel. He was buried on the Mount of Olives, and former Israeli Prime Minister said of Robert Maxwell, um, we will never be able to say how important Robert Maxwell was to Israel. So those two important points about Epstein. And in the 80s, when he was in London, I didn't start off, my interest in this didn't start off with Epstein. It only began a few years ago. My interest 37 years ago was that a friend of mine, my political mentor, turned up dead in some woods in England near our quaint little English town just west of London. If you've watched The Crown, if you've watched Downton Abbey, that's the sort of town we lived on. Lived in. He turns up dead. I asked the right questions in the wrong places, and I come across this whole network of arms dealing, money laundering, Iran-Iraq war, Israeli agents, people like Ari Ben-Menashe in London. And my friend, whose name is Hugh Simmons, was the guy who was arranging the money laundering networks, because money laundering is a specialty, and that's what he specialized in as a lawyer. That was what I was investigating. And then Ari, with whom I've remained in touch on and off, in 2019 came out with the revelations that, in addition to working with Hugh, my friend, he also worked with and recruited Jeffrey Epstein. And he described what was going on. And I was reading this. I haven't spoken to Ari about this. And he was describing exactly the same things that I'd been researching about the 80s, which networks have continued to exist and brought forward. So that's the biggest reason I have to believe that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in other things. There are more revelations coming to the fore, but I'll take a bit of a breather here to allow you the opportunity to ask some questions.
We have got a tremendous guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. And Geoff is with us, Geoff Gilson, and he has got an incredible book, Maggie's Hammer. That is the latest from him, and we will talk about that a little bit later on as we move through this day of broadcast excellence, as a man from St. Louis used to say. So, why do you believe that the global institutions were willing to protect Epstein for decades, and what did he offer them that made this so valuable?
Well, going back to the 80s, and one of the things I say about my book, Maggie's Hammer, is that, and I didn't set out to find that out, I didn't set out to discover it, but it's what I discovered, sort of making a long story short, is that in the 80s, primarily with the Iran-Iraq war. Not everyone will remember that, but there was a war in the 80s between Iran and Iraq. Both sides were sanctioned by the United Nations, so you couldn't sell arms to them legally, but you could sell them illegally. And $80 billion was sold to Iran, $60 billion to Iraq, and government agencies, intelligence agencies around the world made a living illegally. Um, Corruption in Western intelligence agencies and Israeli intelligence agencies were turbocharged during the 80s. Vast networks were set up that were involved in arms dealing and money laundering and then drug trafficking and human trafficking. And those networks, I mean, there are books in America that describe them variously as the Enterprise or Octopus. And some of your listeners may remember those names. But these vast networks, which were set up primarily by the British, the Americans, and the Israelis, operated in the 80s and then carried forward through the war on terror to where we are now. Hugh Simmons, the subject of my book Maggie's Hammer, set up the money laundering, primarily through the British Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. And we were both known to Margaret Thatcher, and he was tasked illicitly with doing this. But Epstein, a young, brash man of the 30s, and I never came across Epstein until Ari Ben-Menashe talked about it in 2019. left New York, Bear Stearns, and came to the United Kingdom to take part in the arms laundering, the arms dealing and the money laundering, and made his money. While there, he was introduced to Robert Maxwell, who was also engaged in illicit arms dealing. Through Robert, he met Ghislaine. Ghislaine became his girlfriend. Through Ghislaine, he met one of Ghislaine's best friends, Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew introduced Epstein to his sexual depravity, because this sexual depravity, this trafficking in young girls, is a mainstay of the British aristocracy. I hate to say it, but it is. Some of the stories that you can be told, and I have been told, of what the British aristocrats get up to at country weekend parties, it's nothing like the Crown or Downton Abbey. Parents literally lend their children out to visiting guests. And Epstein was introduced to this by Prince Andrew. People wonder if Prince Andrew was blackmailed by Epstein. It was the other way around. Epstein and Prince Epstein and Prince Andrew were co-partners in this, but also Prince Andrew was an official trade representative as a member of the royal family for Great Britain, whose primary trade at that time and since is arms. That's where the connection was made. Then, through Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell, he was introduced to Ari Ben Menashe, became an asset for Israel, and at that time became, and when he returned to New York, a major asset for Israel. Now, this may be more than most people can understand, but just recently, a publication called Dropsite News has been producing extensive and very well resourced information which backs up what Ari and I have been saying. Epstein, working with Israeli intelligence, negotiated on his own security deals with Mongolia and the Ivory Coast, and was a back channel to Putin over Syria. This makes him a major player. He wasn't doing this for blackmail purposes. He was a major player. Why? Because he's deniable, because he was intelligent, and because he had connections. That's what I fear people are missing. And that's why
Wow.
his activities have been protected.
We have got a great guest with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He joins us live. He is absolutely amazing. And I am so happy we've got him with us today here on our big broadcast. So, one of the things that you brought up the Maxwell Andrew axis, essentially. You present a very different interpretation of Prince Andrew's involvement. Not as someone that Epstein corrupted, but as someone who opened the door for Epstein into
Yes.
essentially covert finance, weapons brokering. Um, there's going to be all sorts of people on the internet that are going to see this interview, and they are going to want to know what evidence you have.
Well,
Talk to us a little bit about that.
a lot of the evidence is in plain sight. It's just that people aren't make connecting the dots. First of all, according to Ari, Epstein definitely was in London in the 80s. He definitely was selling arms. He was involved with a gentleman called Sir Douglas Leese. This has been confirmed by Ari Berminashi and other people. Through Douglas Leese, he met Robert Maxwell. This has been confirmed by Ari Ben Menashe, a name which I think most people know. Through Robert, he was introduced to Ghislaine. Of course, there is no doubt about that. But the story in New York is that he became friendly with Ghislaine in the 90s. No, absolutely not. Even biographies of Prince Andrew, and there's one very recent one that has just come out, written by a guy called Andrew Lowney, Lownie, who talks in detail about the relationship between Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell, and not about Epstein directly, but about Prince Andrew's role in and arms laundering, in arms dealing. The thing about Andrew is, and this is true of the royal family and the aristocracy in Great Britain in general, is that you don't leave your belongings to a host of people. It goes to the firstborn. And one of the classic features of British aristocratic life is what we call the second son. Captain Hook in Peter Pan is a classic second son, well-spoken captain because he's got no money. He became a pirate. And this is what happens to the sons of royalty and the second sons of nobility. They have no money. Prince Andrew never had any money. Annual income, his annual need is about £3 million a year. His annual income as a former Navy pilot is £20,000. He has to make it up somehow, and he makes it up illicitly with arrangements that King Charles is not very happy about. This is why he interconnected with Epstein. The two of them were involved in arms dealing together. So that is all documented. But what is not documented is the relationship between Andrew and Epstein. For example, there's a picture of Epstein and Andrew together. There is no sense
Oh,
in that
there.
picture.
This is the thing that always makes me cringe or kind of shake my head when I see all this stuff. There is pictures with Epstein with all these mother all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
In fact, you know, when they were making comments about well, Trump and Epstein didn't know each other and all that stuff.
yeah.
I'm like, well, and I think it's probably been doctored since then. I'm sure it's been edited. I'm sure you're never going to be able to find this except on the original VHS. But Trump and Epstein were hanging out at like WrestleMania 5. And they showed it on pay per view where they're both sitting ringside at Trump Taj Mahal. So Trump knew Epstein, and it's kind of like this. There are pictures of Prince Andrew and Epstein hanging out together.
Oh, yeah, and there are, and there's no sense from those pictures that Andrew is in some sort of subservient relationship with Epstein. Prince Andrew gave a disastrous interview to the British press in 2019, and there was no sense of apology, no sense that he'd done anything wrong, and no sense that he was a junior partner because he wasn't. And the evidence is there, particularly in this new book about Andrew's undertakings. And they simply marry. Now, beyond that, do I have bank statements? No. But you had two people engaged in the same sort of activity together in the 80s, not later in the 90s. Um, as far as other evidence about what Epstein was up to and Andrew was up to, and Andrew's never denied it, and there's this information coming out about Epstein at the moment. Beyond that is kind of circumstantial. I know a bit about the royal family, and King Charles was obviously unhappy about the allegations that have been made about Andrew. But being upset with your brother about the, yeah, the allegations is one thing. Charles and William, between them, have absolutely stripped Andrew. This is not because there are allegations. This is because they know. And that is my information as to why Charles has stripped Andrew of all his titles. He's now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. This is why he's being farmed out to a small cottage with no income from the royalty at all. Because Charles knows what Andrew was doing, not just the sex, but also the arms dealing and the business with Epstein. But time will tell. Time will tell. I mean, as I say, my worry is that even though I'm sitting on your show talking about this, even though Maggie's Hammer, my book, demonstrates what was happening in the 80s, people are going to pass this by.
We have got a great guest with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer, and he joins us today here on our big broadcast. So, one more thing on this Epstein Maxwell Andrew axis that seems to be a thing essentially. In your view, how intertwined were the British elite social circles with the covert weapons commerce during this period?
Actually, in terms of the elite, very little, because the British aristocracy are very snobby. They're not as rich as you think, but they would not dirty their hands with this sort of thing. Um, just to go back, and this is detailed more in my book Maggie's Hammer, which deals more with the how this all began in the 80s. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister of Great Britain. even though she is now an icon in the world. At the time, she wasn't. She was a rank outsider. She became leader in the 1975, and Hugh and I helped write speeches for her then. But she was not favored by the Tory, the Conservative Party establishment. She was seen as an outsider. She had to use people like us to get to be leader of the Conservative Party. And when she became prime minister, she was not well known. She was not well liked. That came much later. What she took over was a country that had been destroyed by socialism. The public purse was deeply in deficit. She needed to balance it. Industry was crippled because too much of it had been nationalized. The first thing that she did, literally to make money, was pimp out the British military and the British intelligence services. And that's how they became corrupted, primarily to the United States, but also in conjunction with Israel to do whatever was needed around the world. For example, America financed and provided weapons to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 80s to get the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. But CIA and US military personnel were not allowed to step foot inside Afghanistan, enter the British military because they could. So, literally, American military would hand over weapons along with the Mujahideen to the British military on the Afghan border, and the British military would take over and they got paid for it. The country got paid for it. It was British intelligence operatives in the Lebanon who helped to find the people who committed the bombing of the US Marine barracks and the US Embassy. Margaret Thatcher literally pimped out British intelligence and its military, and they were the people who became involved in arms dealing and money laundering to make money for themselves as well as for the country. Meanwhile, Margaret Thatcher with industry literally turned plowshares into swords. At the beginning of the 80s, Britain was about number 8 as an arms exporter around the world. By the end of the century, end of the decade, it was number 2. And if you want to supply weapons to countries and be a regular supplier, you have to have a front door, you have to have a back door. So that if you've got a ruler in Africa, for example, who is one moment um, elected democratically, front door. They then become a dictator, back door. And Hugh Simmons was one of a team that tasked personally by Margaret Thatcher with arranging that back door. And that's how this all came about. But the people involved, not the elites. Hugh's father was a working class guy from Yorkshire, and he made money. But and Hugh had money, but it was the nouveau riche who got involved in all of this. I'm not sure if that's an American expression, but you know anyway, it was the nouveau riche, but it wasn't the elites.
We have got a great guest with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer, and he joins us today here in our broadcast. So let's talk a little bit about Maggie's Hammer. This book is incredibly well written. Tell me a little bit about your writing process for the book.
Well, the writing process was very interesting. I didn't know how to. I've been asked by a couple of literary agents if I would write some more books, and I said no. I've got one story to tell. That's the story that happened, and I'm not sure. It's very kind of you to say it's very well written. I tried my best, but when I set out to write the story, I mean, I spent 27 years investigating this, first-hand sources and research, and then I sat down to write it, and I wanted to write it as a conversation. There's a well-known broadcaster on American radio. I can't remember his name offhand, but he once said, if you want to do good radio, if you want to write well, imagine that you are just chatting with somebody sat in an armchair next to you. And that's what I tried to do. And the second thing, just simply in terms of writing process, I broke all the rules. My mother was great about teaching me about English grammar, and I broke all the rules. I had half sentences because what I wanted people to read was what I was experiencing. So if I was scared, I write quarter sentences. This then happened to me, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. That's 8 sentences, and that's how I wrote it. So I like to think that in what I've written, it's a fast-paced novel. And the other thing is, I read lots of John Grisham because John Grisham is a great fast-paced writer, and just dealing with the writing process, one of the things that I learned about John Grisham, and I had to study him really well is that in any chapter, he barely uses the same word twice. I never wrote, so I made it a point of using different words to keep people's attention. Not sure if that's what you meant, but that was my writing process. So if you read the book, the first part is an adventure story. Because I discovered my friend was dead, I asked the right questions, wrong places. For 2 years, I was literally on the run from people who were trying to kill me. Then I came to America. I am a dual British and American citizen. I conducted interviews, just literally calling people out of the blue, turning up on their doorstep. I could never quite work out why they talked to me. They said they talked to me because they seemed to be genuine and honest. And then the last part is piecing it all together. Where did these networks come from, and do they carry forward, and are they relevant today?
We have got a great guest with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer. He joins us today here on our big broadcast. So, the book, you put a lot of time and effort into the book. What do you want readers to take away from your writing of this book?
The most important thing I want people to take away is think about anything that's going on nationally or internationally that annoys you. You'd like to be able to do something about it. I don't know that I'm able to do anything, but I discovered a lot of stuff I never set out to discover. How? I lived in a sleepy little town in Great Britain. Something that happened next to me didn't make sense, and I asked questions. There's a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe, where Leonardo DiCaprio is a CIA operative in the Middle East, and he's being directed by his controller, Russell Crowe. And the whole time, Leonardo DiCaprio is out there in car chases, and Russell Crowe's back in the United States with his headphones on, directing him. And Russell Crowe's just getting on with life. So it's like, okay, I can't remember what Leonardo DiCaprio's name is in the story. Let's say his name is Jack. Jack, what's going on? I'm in a car chase at the moment, and I'm not. Okay, hang on. Yes, sweetie, you've got your lunch bag. Okay, off you go now. And Russell Crowe's just getting on with his life because all of these people, all of these elites, all of these secret, covert people are real people with real lives, and you may have a secret operative for something wrong happening next to you. So if something happens next to you and you don't like it, ask questions about it because you have no idea what you may uncover. And that's how we, the people, can actually make a difference. Taking note of what's going on around us and doing something about it. That is actually the most important thing I want people to get from this book.
We have got a great guest with us today. Joins us live here on our big broadcast. Geoff Gilson is with us. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer. And he joins us today here on our big program. So, what's been some of the feedback you've gotten on the book so far, my friend?
Well, threats on my life, which is interesting. Someone tried to shoot me when I was trying to get the answers way back in the 90s. Most of the feedback I have got has been positive, but I've been warned off by the CIA 3 times. If ever there was any doubt that I was dealing with matters that are real and that have impact, it is that the CIA have tried to warn me off 3 times, and a British Prime Minister had his primary official call me once, telling me to stop what I was doing. So I seem to have stumbled onto something.
Absolutely amazing. We have got a great guest with us today. Geoff Gilson is with us. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer. And he joins us today here on our big program. And you can join us each and every week on iHeartRadio and also 50 plus AM FM stations across the country and around the world. So, with this book, what is next for you now that this is out there and off and running and all the various things?
Well, I'm retired now. I do shows like this to talk about the book. It will either um, trigger people to do something about what's in it. We'll see what happens with Epstein. Personally, as far as the book is concerned, I would love someone to make it into a movie. I think it's a great movie. I don't think anybody in government is ever going officially to confirm the contents, but I think it would make a great movie, even if it was fiction. I've just got to work out who is going to play me, and I'm not. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to have to wait to see what the new crop of young British actors look like.
We have got Geoff Gilson with us today. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer. So, where can we connect with you online, social media, all the websites, everything?
Well, the website for the book is maggieshammer.org. And that's as it sounds, Maggies, hammer, one word, .org. You can Google that. You can Google my name, Geoff Gilson, that's spelled the English way, Geoff. If you Google one or the other, you will find me, you will find the book. I update what I'm doing on Facebook. Again, Geoff Gilson, you'll find.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Geoff Gilson with us today. He's the author of Maggie's Hammer, and he joins us today here on our big program. And you can find our videos at BitChute, Rumble, Clout Hub, all the various places. Rumble, and of course, you can find them over there at JiggyJaguar.com. So, Geoff Gilson is our guest today here on our big broadcast. And we have had a heck of a time chatting here with Geoff Gilson. I think maybe he got a phone call and he needed to reboot StreamYard or come back in or whatever the heck it is, because that seems to be what happens when people connect on StreamYard. There's all sorts of issues. But our thanks to Geoff Gilson for joining us today and pulling back the curtain on one of the most complex, controversial, and globally significant hidden networks of the last 4 decades. Whether you agree with all of his conclusions or not, the scope of his research, spanning arms trafficking, covert finance, intelligence alliances, political protection at the highest levels, forces a reevaluation of what we think we know about the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, and shadow world that operates behind public view. You can dive deeper into the decades-long investigation at maggieshammer.org. Explore Geoff's book, Maggie's Hammer, which connects the dots from Thatcher to Epstein to modern intelligence operations. And we appreciate him joining us today here on the world famous Jiggy Jaguar radio broadcast. And you can find us 24/7 over there at jiggyjaguar.com. And of course on the Odyssey and iHeartRadio apps, our on-demand podcast. Yes, I'm going to start saying podcast again on this program. I think we can say the P word again. Is available on AMFM247.com and many other various places. We appreciate Geoff for joining us here on our big broadcast.